Let's talk JD Vance. So you guys are all starting to get to know JD Vance because he has been nominated by Donald Trump to be his vice presidential nominee. Now, JD Vance is a senator from Ohio. He's newly elected. He only won like about 2 years ago. He was running against Tim Ryan during the midterms, but Tim Ryan lost and JD Vance won, even though I think Tim Ryan probably would have made a much better senator for the state of Ohio. And then after JD Vance became senator, he was regularly the most loyal of Trumpsters in the Senate. But this is not where JD Vance's political career begins. In fact, you would be a little confused if you knew JD Vance from, say, I don't know, 2017, 2018, because during that period, JD Vance was what you would call a never Trumper. And when I say never Trumper, I mean he is fervently against Donald Trump. Here is him being confronted with 21 seconds of the things that he's called Donald Trump on Fox News during the race to see who was going to be Trump's VP, and Vance was actively participating, trying to hustle for the position.
This is an evolution, and I know you've been asked about this before, about past comments that you've made about Donald Trump. You've said, I'm a never Trump guy, never liked him. Terrible candidate, idiot if you voted for him, might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical a-hole, cultural heroine, noxious and reprehensible. Those are things that
might be America's Hitler, cultural heroine. And by the way, I've checked it. He did call him cultural heroine. Mind you, now JD Vance, when he says cultural heroine, you need to understand JD Vance was born in Ohio. He was born in the Rust Belt to a mother who struggled with addiction. And this is something that I can actually relate to him with because I was born into a very similar circumstance. My mother was addicted to heroin. I don't know the specific circumstance of what his mother was addicted to. But if you're calling Trump cultural heroine, when you're coming from a family that has felt this personal sting of addiction, that's not a light comment. That's not a light comment at all. Now, if you think these are just a bunch of words, because, just hearing somebody say back to him, oh, remember when you called Trump cultural heroine? Remember when you said he was America's Hitler? Wild statements. It's kind of hard to believe. Here's some clips of him, baby-faced and shaved, because when he went through his evolution, apparently all it required was some facial hair. I don't know. Here is him not too long ago on Bloomberg and other outlets, condemning Donald Trump as toxic for the Republican Party.
Right, I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
Trump's running mate, JD Vance, wasn't always a MAGA advocate. Back in 2016, Vance was an outspoken critic of then-candidate Trump.
There is definitely an element of Donald Trump support that has its basis in racism or xenophobia. I know who I'm going to vote for. I'm definitely not going to vote for Trump because I think that he's projecting very complex problems onto simple villains.
But Vance predicted a Trump loss.
But I've noticed this willingness from people who think a lot like I do that, look, we told you so. To all these white working class voters, we told you so. We told you that Trump was going to be a terrible candidate. We told you that you were an idiot if you voted for him.
And in now deleted tweets, JD Vance called Trump reprehensible. Fellow Christians, everyone is watching us when we apologize for this man. Lord help us.
I mean, JD Vance was a dug-in opponent of Donald Trump, and this was in 2016, 2017. So this was not that long ago. And he was calling him cultural heroine. He was saying he was going to be America's Hitler. He's like America's Hitler in private correspondence with his friends. And he went from that to Donald Trump's champion within a small 2 to 3 year time period. Maybe even, I don't even think it gets to 3 years. I think it's like 2 years. He goes from, as a Christian, I cannot apologize to him. He is Hitler, to Trump's agenda is amazing for America. I love Donald Trump. He's saving this country. He might be one of the best presidents of a generation. I mean, it went to the point where he was showing like a dogged loyalty to Donald Trump. And this is one of the main things that kind of sets me off about JD Vance, is I don't really know how much of him is real or not. If he believes what he believes when he's talking about Donald Trump, because he made such a quick transformation. I mean, I've seen somebody transform their politics over decades. Like I've seen, like I can go back and see how their ideology changed with time and experience. But this is like he going from I cannot, as Christians, we cannot support him. He is Hitler to he's the best president of a generation in 2 years. It makes me question exactly how genuine that is, how much he believes it, or if he's just kind of going with the flow that, hey, this is what the crowd's roaring for, so let me go with the crowd, because the Never Trumpers kind of sunk. You know, they kind of sunk, or they're going out of fashion. It's really hard to say, but that's one thing that sets me off about JD Vance. But to compensate for this lack of loyalty early on during the Trump movement, it's almost as if JD Vance is even more loyal than your average MAGA supporter. If you go through the type of commentary JD Vance has made, JD Vance has indicated publicly on national television, on ABC News, that if given the responsibility by Donald Trump to overthrow the American election system, to install him as president of the United States, therefore cooing the results of the election, rejecting the results of the election, and keeping him as president, and usurping the vice president's national authority to do that. He doesn't have the authority. He doesn't have the constitutional authority to do this. Usurping that, ignoring their constitutionally mandated authority, and doing that. When asked whether he would do that, he was all on board. He said absolutely he would do that. So he's gone from never Trumper to I will damage American institutions. I will reject the democratic votes of the people and help try to coup the election system for Donald Trump. It's a really wretched transformation. And it makes me kind of despise him more than the regular MAGA loyalist to Trump, because it's somebody who could have seen above all the smoke and mirrors, but has chosen to go into it, either for personal gain or who knows what reason. But listen to this.
Mr. Donald Trump.
So you're not troubled by the sexual assault and defamation. Let me ask you about January 6th. You've been mentioned as a possible vice president for Donald Trump. Had you been vice president on January 6th, would you have certified the election results?
Oh, George, this is such a ridiculous question, in part because the law has changed here. We, of course, had
well, I didn't ask you about going forward. I asked you what you would have done. I asked you what you would have done.
George, here's what I think. Here's what I think happened in 2020, and I know you guys are obsessed with talking about this. I have to make a point here. You constantly say to people like me, "Why do you talk about January the 6th? Why do you talk about the election of 2020?" And then you ask about us multiple times during a 6-minute interview. But look, you asked the question, and I'll answer it. Do I think there were problems in 2020? Yes, I do. Do I think it was a problem that big technology companies working with the intelligence services censored the presidential campaign of Donald Trump? Yes. Do I think it's a problem that Pennsylvania changed its balloting rules?
By the way, they didn't censor the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. I don't know what he's talking about.
In the middle of the election season in a way that even some courts in Pennsylvania have said was illegal. Yes, I think these were problems, George, and I think there is a political solution to those problems. So litigating which slate of electors was legitimate, I think is fundamentally the political solution to the problems that existed in 2020. It's a reasonable debate to have, and I find it weird, George, that people like you obsessed with what I call what happened in 2020. You're so incurious about what actually happened in 2020. Which is why so many people mistrust our elections in this country. We've got to do better.
So when he talks about the slate of electors here, what he's talking about, like, hey, it was completely valid to consider alternative slates of electors. When he says alternative slates of electors, let me be clear. We have the Electoral College, and we have electors who are voted on by the people. So the people come together in a state. When you go and you vote, you're not voting directly for the president. You're actually voting for an elector who represents the vote for the president and then goes and then actually does the vote for the president. At least that's supposed to be the system and how it works. And we have official electors who are actually chosen after the people vote. If a district votes for Joe Biden, they send a Joe Biden elector up, boom, he's got an electoral vote. That's how it's supposed to work. That's the idea. What Donald Trump's team did is after he lost, is they went around and they made alternative elector slates with people who represent elector votes in states that Donald Trump had lost, and sent those up and tried to certify those illegally, formed did fraudulent documents saying that these were the real electors, and then were taking them and then sent them up so that there would be confusion about the real electors versus these new electors that the Trump campaign had just chosen and said, yeah, sure, we represent the people of this district. Our district voted for Trump, even if they did. And so the idea was, what he's talking about, considering alternative slates of electors. That's the slate he's talking about. He's talking about taking a pretend playhouse slate of electors and saying, oh, well, not necessarily this slate of electors is the real one, but we don't know which one is the real one. So instead of having, us decide here who won the presidency, let's just send it down to the states and they will decide. But the majority of state houses are controlled by Republicans. So they would be sending this decision down to an institution that is majority controlled by the GOP, the ruling party, who that would be in. People would say that at that moment, Donald Trump would try to push for those state houses to make him stay president, even after losing the election. That was the coup plan. That is what he's saying that he thinks is respectable. To stop the election process, to consider another fake, completely made up slate of electors that says, nuh-uh, we are coping, Donald Trump actually won, just so the state houses can decide, which are controlled by people that support what they support. It's a problem. It's anti-democratic. It's anti-institutional. It's rejecting the democratic results of the election. Democracy does not function if there's only two major parties and one of them does not accept defeat. The whole point of democracy is that when you lose, you go home and you try again in 2 to 4 years. That's the whole point. That's what encourages you to go home, is because that means you can get another shot next time. But if every single time you just reject another shot and you do damage to the institution, I mean, these institutions only have as much power as we give them. And if we don't trust them with any power, we whittle the trust in these institutions to become less powerful. Our democratic vote becomes less powerful. It becomes more easy to manipulate the general public around these institutions, try to get them to disregard them, even if it's not in their own interests. For example, trying to disregard the amount of controls on the president of the United States when it comes to what is criminal and what is not criminal, to hold him to the same standards that every other American is held to. I mean, my point is here is that JD Vance is quite literally saying on national television that he is willing to overthrow the election system to keep Trump in power by considering fake, made-up elector slates just to take part in Trump's plan so he can get this vice presidential nomination, gain his favor. This is loyalism to an extreme degree. To be clear, Mike Pence was asked to do this and he said no, because he said that, and he was right, that it usurped the constitutional authority, that it was not within his mandated authorities from the Constitution to just throw out the election results and send it back to the states, considering these fake electors that the person who lost the election created with their campaign. And so what he is saying, JD Vance, is disregard that, screw that, I'm with Trump all the way. And this is the thing that scares me about JD Vance versus the other guys, is that JD Vance does not offer much to Trump when it comes to experience. He's newly elected. He's not extremely informed when it comes to foreign affairs. He is not extremely experienced when it comes to domestic legislating or moving the power and levers around. He comes from Ohio, so he comes from the Rust Belt, so he can help Trump on the campaign trail a little bit when it comes to trying to appeal to those states, but he's not bringing in a bunch of new votes. He's young, that's a benefit, but not a ton of experience, not a ton of connections and institutional power. This is somebody that Trump is going to demand a lot of loyalty from, and he has indicated from his past statements like this that he is more than willing to give that loyalty to Trump. And that's what I think got JD Vance's position over someone like Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley, who could help bring in the voters that Donald Trump lost and was continuing to lose even after Nikki Haley dropped out, as an attempt to either appeal to moderates or appeal to those Republicans who are still not with him. But it is instead going for this guy. Why would he go for this guy when Nikki Haley is so much more well-known, somebody that could appeal to a wider swath of the population? She's also going to be somebody that people are more familiar with on the national level. It could maybe show a more moderate side to Trump, especially in the fallout of the terrible shooting. But instead, he went with JD Vance. Why go with the worst campaign option with less experience and less connections? Well, I think one is that JD Vance agrees with Trump's agenda, and that is an outgrowth of number two, that JD Vance is going to be largely loyal. It's an abandoning of certain campaign advantages now for political loyalty from the vice president later, if he is to be in another position like Mike Pence was, like he's being quizzed on right here, and him saying, I will do what Donald Trump wants. I will make it consider other, I will make the House consider other slates of electors. I'll send it back down to the state houses. I'll do what the Trump coup plot was asking for. That distinguishes him from someone like Mike Pence, who is not willing to do that. That shows him to be extra loyal, and that is a tool that Donald Trump has. And also, having someone who's disempowered under you, like JD Vance, means it's going to be very hard for him to usurp him. It's somebody that Donald Trump can trust. I've also read reports that he also interpersonally likes the guy. Point is that while Nikki Haley would have been a choice for winning a campaign, this is a guy you would choose for winning your legislative and power agenda. Not only trying to get the things done that Trump wants to get done, but having loyal workhorses under him who are not going to usurp him, work around him, or, and this is the big thing, hold him back. Hold him back. When Donald Trump first ran for presidency, and I keep saying this over and over again because the starkness of this just keeps clouding my mind. When he first ran for president, I remember in 2016 being consoled, and a lot of other people being consoled over the idea, like, don't worry, Donald Trump is going to surround himself, and this was being told to me by Trump supporters, he's going to surround himself with experts. And these experts, if you don't believe Donald Trump is knowledgeable enough on the issues, will inform him. And then he proceeded to do 4 years of mismanagement, clearly disregarding the advice of experts until they were the last person to whisper into his ear, until he then changed his mind later anyway. Whether it be with how he managed the flip-flopping on the issue of Syria, whether it had to do with his mismanagement of relationship with the Korean Peninsula, whether it had to do with his mismanagement of point is, Donald Trump is somebody who was being advertised in 2016 as, maybe a wild card, maybe a Molotov to the establishment, but don't worry, we're going to have some adults in the room. This time, the advertisement is, there are no adults in the room. There is no experts in the room. There is nobody to reel him in. He is going to be surrounded by yes men. He's going to be surrounded by people who are doggedly loyal to him. There are no adults. There are no experts. There are just the people around Trump and the experts that will enable Trump. But there is not anybody who will challenge Trump. Donald Trump has spent very little time writing up a transition agenda, as in choosing the people who will serve in this deputy position, choosing the people who serve in this position. Donald Trump has been very focused generally on winning the election. He's been, even though this choice right here isn't one you would make primarily based upon winning the election, but that has been his main focus. He has not been choosing the transition agenda that much. And so that means that will probably fall to projects like Project 2525 in order to fill the institutions with the loyalists that he requires. So Donald Trump, by choosing JD Vance, in my mind, this is his first post-election pick for the transition process, in my mind, because JD Vance feels more like a pick from a loyalty perspective, somebody who will do what he says once he's in that position, than somebody he picks to help him be a dogged campaigner. And considering that Project 2025 and others are waiting in the wings for when he wins to fill these administrative positions, and we're going to see those picks starting getting made after he wins. He's going to wait till last second like last time. That means he's going to have to rely on projects like Project 2025. He's going to have to rely on as many loyalists as he can grab going into this new administration, as he doesn't want to make the same mistake as last time, which is not having a transition agenda because he didn't think he was going to win or they just weren't ready. And he also doesn't want to have the problem of not having loyalists around him who are there to hold him back and remind him of the institutions that you should respect. Because this time around, there is no institution to respect but Donald Trump Incorporated. Point is, this guy is really bad. I don't like him. I don't like this JD Vance fella. Oh, and can I also throw out there, there's a few more things I could throw out there about JD Vance, right? JD Vance, well, some people say he's like a populist on economic issues. Like, on a lot of these issues, you're going to see him get whitewashed very quickly. For example, the JD Vance campaign deleted this off of his campaign website within the last 24 hours. I am 100% pro-life and believe that abortion has turned our society into a place where we see children as an inconvenience to be thrown away rather than a blessing to be nurtured. Eliminating abortion is a first and foremost about protecting the unborn. Listen to this, eliminating abortion. But it's also about making our society more pro-child and more pro-family. The historic Dobbs decision puts this new era of society into motion, one that prioritizes family and the sanctity of all life. While Donald Trump will throw enough bones to the anti-abortion crowd to keep their support, he personally understands that crusading against abortion is not a popular issue. But I do want to remind people, and probably as a New York socialite, he doesn't probably care personally that much about it. But I do want to remind people that even though most of the conversation has been about Joe Biden's age at 81, Donald Trump is 77 years old. If Donald Trump does win re-election, he's going to be president for 4 years, leaving office in 2028 if he leaves office, but assuming the best and he leaves office, that means he'll be leaving office older than Biden is right now. And he's not somebody with, I would say, the most astute and perfect health record. And considering the type of parties he was mingling in, I wouldn't be surprised if a reason he takes deep breaths is a little bit of the point is, I don't think he's not going to be around forever. And the biggest role of the vice president, Trump's 78 now? Okay, not 77, 78. And the biggest role of the vice president is to take over if the president dies. And there were a lot of times where people who nobody thought could be president of the United States or would under normal circumstances not become president of the United States, like JD Vance, who could now be catapulted into that position if Trump was to just say, have a heart attack. Even if right now Donald Trump will reel in JD Vance for his election chances, notwithstanding the conservatives making him change his position post-election so he can be more anti-abortion, or him wiggling in some other anti-abortion policies because of the people who back him. But let's say Donald Trump wins and then dies a year into his presidency. This guy is all about ending abortion. Overturning Roe versus Wade was the first step. For people like JD Vance, the next step is getting rid of abortion altogether. So this is not a political moderate. If people might choose to concentrate on the economic populism, but banning abortion is JD Vance's position. And if he became president of the United States, which Donald Trump has now said he believes by choosing him that he would make a good president, he is choosing somebody who's explicitly in favor of banning abortion. At Vivian Wolf, hey friendo, how are you feeling about the assassination attempt and its implications now that you've had a minute to breathe? Not good. I think a lot of people catastrophize the situation. By the way, we still have one more thing to talk about JD Vance. We're not done with JD Vance yet, guys. I just want to quickly answer this question. I think a lot of people catastrophize the situation where Donald Trump was shot, therefore he will win. Some people pointed to like Teddy Roosevelt and other historical examples, which not only do I think are not good historical examples, but some of these historical examples are bad examples because it doesn't show what they think they're showing. For example, when Teddy Roosevelt got shot, he lost that election. Other people have got shot and have lost elections too. So I think that it could have given him a temporary boost in the polls, but all the post-assassination polls that I've seen so far don't seem to be giving him much boost, if any, from the shooting. I think it can galvanize his base. I think it can help him fundraise more. I think that if somebody was sitting on the fence between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, this might be something that pushes them over to Donald Trump. But I don't think it's going to be flipping any of the independent voters that Donald Trump needs to win in order to secure votes that he doesn't currently have or almost have. As for the impact on American politics, I think this is bad for the temperature of the conversation in the United States, honestly. I am scared of revenge attacks. I'm scared of the tempo of conversation directing more and more towards violence between neighbors. I don't want people to shoot their neighbors. I'd rather people just argue with their neighbors or not like their neighbors if they disagree with their politics than shooting their neighbors. And anytime stuff like this happens, it's not only conversations about revenge killings of like other politicians, but that type of violence tends to more often than not bleed down into the community. Most people don't see Joe Biden walking down the street, and so your opportunity as a crazed internet schizoid to actually stab Joe Biden in the neck is very low. But your opportunity to stab that local librarian who, you know, wears that queer pin and has that abortion sign in their front yard, that's a lot more plausible. That's a lot more feasible. It's not the people who are like, it's not like the people who are like the most red-blooded in their rhetoric when talking about, for example, the war in Gaza, the Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip, that get like blowback. It was like that little Palestinian boy. Or no, I don't even think it was Palestinian. I think it was like Sudanese, a little Muslim kid who got stabbed to death by that psycho. It's people downstream that are going to feel the worst aspects of it. I don't like it. I'm not happy with it. I don't like this turn for American politics. And I'd rather Trump lose at the ballot box, because if he becomes a martyr, it's a totally different problem anyway. I want Trumpism to be gone. I wanted to get like thrown into the dustbin of history. And as much as I'm not a huge fan of like Joe Biden when it comes to all the policy stuff, I think he's had some achievements. I think he's certainly much better than the other option. America's doing better than other G7 countries, even though, again, it's still very critical of Joe Biden's policies. Like if Joe Biden at 82 years old beats Donald Trump, my goodness. I mean, how could you argue that Donald Trump should run again, or that Trumpism is necessarily the future of the Republican Party at that point? It's going to be much harder. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes, MX Wolf. Let me read your comment, and then we'll finish the segment on Vance. I think the effect is to kneecap Democrats and their ability to truthfully describe the threat to the American democracy that Trump represents for fear of inciting further violence. I've talked about this before. This was basically, well, I didn't say that was the main effect, but I said that we cannot allow our desire for this not to spiral into a violent shit show to mask the truth about the threat to democratic institutions. I said this in the video we released, I think this morning. I think right-wing violence around the election was already such a high risk as to be near certainty. Though this doesn't help, of course. Anyway, sorry to derail. I mean, if the violence was already like certain to happen, which I'm not 100% sure of, but let's just say it was, I don't think attacks on the most popular right-wing figure in the United States when it comes to the type of people who would be willing to do these types of attacks, I don't think that's gonna de-intensify it. Sorry, I thought there was a siren, but it was just my my generator going off. Low key, if anything happened to me, they wouldn't be able to fall back on social media either. I don't know what you're talking about, DRP. Just a typical mental illness case, Smokey. What are you guys talking about in chat? Site chat going crazy. Okay, let's finish talking about JD Vance, because I don't like JD Vance, and the longer I can spend talking about JD Vance, the better. So, Julia Simpson, how much of the policies Trump will probably use could realistically be accomplished if Trump wins? This is hard to say because Trump makes a lot of promises. During his first term, he promised that he would get rid of all debt in 4 years. Obviously didn't happen. It was never gonna happen. I don't think anybody ever treated that claim too seriously. But then he became, not only did he not eliminate the debt, he made it so he had the largest deficit of any president ever. So not only did he not fulfill that promise, he fulfilled the extreme other end of that promise. Like, and like, you could have made like a more reasonable like promise. You could be like, I'm gonna
Occurred
cut
is
down our
occurred.
deficit, you know, something like that.
How
But he
much of the
didn't.
policies Trump will probably use could realistically be accomplished if Trump wins?
Besides that, I mean, you'd have to go issue by issue. So I mean, a lot of it depends. Do they have the House and do they have the Senate? If they have the House and Senate, they can get a lot more done. If not, then whatever he can do by executive order, he'll probably be able to do. And if he doesn't have the House or if he doesn't have the Senate, then he's going to have a split government and it's going to be difficult to get a lot of his agenda through. But depending on certain legal decisions, he does seem to want to use the power of the presidency to generally just like take control of institutions, replace a lot of our position, a lot of federal bureaucrat positions, fire all of the bureaucrats at will for no reason in particular, and replace them with loyalists. That is the stuff that concerns me the most, and that would be dependent on legal precedent. That would be dependent on legal argument. That's not a question of the people arguing and deciding. That would be up to judges and courts. And recently, the Supreme Court has not had, let's just say, a perfect record. Okay, now, JD Vance. Let's talk about JD Vance. So JD Vance is somebody who is very, very supportive of Viktor Orban. And in fact, the right has had a flirtatious back and forth with Viktor Orban for quite some time now, talking about how fantastic they are in handling the issue of immigration and also his handling of universities. His handling of universities has been quite good. In fact, let me see if I can get what he said on Hungary specifically. Here he goes. In Hungary, under Orban, they offer loans to newly married couples that are forgiven at some point later if those couples have actually stayed together and had kids. Why can't we do that here? Why can't we actually promote family formation? He also called for the de-wokification of schools and cited Orban as an inspiration in an appearance on a right-wing podcast in late September. What do you think? What do you do at the Department of Education? Well, you do what Viktor Orban has done in Hungary, which is basically say you're not allowed to teach critical race theory anymore. You're not allowed to teach critical gender theory anymore. You're not allowed to do these things and get $1 of federal money or $1 of state money. To be clear, he's not saying, hey, you're not allowed to use federal money to fund these specific projects. He's saying if you get any federal money at all, you cannot have these classes. As an educational institution, you're not allowed to explore these topics.
Occurred is occurred.
At all.
Uno5 has donated $5. Zero.
Now, the thing is, hey, how's it going, Fat Otaku? Haven't talked to you forever. You said you'd talk to me, but he keeps dodging. I don't know, maybe he's terrified of me. Maybe I'm just so scary. I'm such a scary guy. So scary. I'm just so scary. I don't know. But he doesn't talk to me. He told me in DMs, I just wanted the record to show that it's because I like men. He said it specifically. You like men, ew, get away. But maybe one day he'll prove me wrong and he'll come on stream. Anyway, hope you're doing well, Short Fat. Did I just call you Short Fat instead of Otaku? I call you Short Fat. Hope you're doing well. So JD Vance's position on Viktor Orban is that he's fantastic. He's great. The way he's managing education over there and just saying, if you're teaching any of these classes we don't like, you get no federal money. That's fantastic. Again, it's not, you cannot use federal money to pay for this. It's, if you teach these classes, you will get no federal money. Now, what's interesting about this is this was something he said multiple times. He said it on podcasts. He said it on TV. And so when a journalist asked him a follow-up question on this, like, hey, you know, Viktor Orban, some people actually critique what he's doing with these schools as pretty authoritarian. JD Vance had no response. And this is one of the main problems I have with the right and their love affair with Viktor Orban, is it's all so surface level. They saw the Tucker News, Fox TV documentary on Viktor Orban. They heard him at CPAC where they invited him in and he said a few conservative things. They heard him and it was like, hey, that guy sounds like Gru from Despicable Me. He sounds like a cool guy. And they did no more digging. They don't know that Viktor Orban runs the European Union country with the most public sector corruption in Europe. I mean, come on, you're running a presidential campaign to get rid of the swamp, and then you invite the biggest swamp creature from Europe into CPAC to speak and represent you and use him as a shining example of what America could be. I mean, like, the last thing I want in the United States is the oligarchification of American right-wing politics. That's crazy. I don't want that. I don't want that at all. Anyway, when he was confronted with one more question about the education policies of Viktor Orban, this is what he had to say.
I want to ask you about some of the things you've said about American universities. I know you've been very critical of them. You gave an interview in February. You said the closest conservatives have ever gotten to successfully dealing with the left-wing domination of universities is Viktor Orban's approach in Hungary. I think his way has to be the model for us, not to eliminate universities, but to give the choice between survival or taking a much less biased approach to teaching. He seized control of state universities and put them in foundations that were then run by his allies. Is that what you're advocating be done in the United States?
Well, Margaret, what you're seeing in the United States actually is that universities are controlled by left-wing foundations. They're not controlled by the American taxpayer, and yet the American taxpayer is sending hundreds of billions of dollars to these universities every single year.
I don't want taxpayers controlling education necessarily. Is that what you're advocating for, federal government?
Margaret, what I'm advocating for is for taxpayers to have a say in how their money is spent. Universities are part of a social contract in this country. They educate our children. They produce important intellectual property. They get a lot of money because of it. But if they're not educating our children well and they're layering the next generation down in mountains of student debt, then they're not meeting their end of the bargain. I think it's totally reasonable to say there needs to be a political solution to that problem.
Well, America's universities still attract talent from around the world, as you've went to one of America's very top schools.
Look, there's still good things about American universities, but it's going in the wrong direction, Margaret.
But Viktor Orban in particular, as you know, I mean, he rewrote the Constitution, he neutered the courts, he has tried to control the media. These are not necessarily conservative principles. So why would you want to mimic him?
Well, look, I'm not endorsing every single thing that Viktor Orban has ever done. I don't know everything he's ever done. What I do think is on the university principle, the idea that taxpayers should have some influence in how their money is spent at these universities, it's a totally reasonable thing. And I do think that he's made some smart decisions there that we could learn from in the United States.
Well,
Man, I really...
was just welcomed at Mar-a-Lago, and as you know,
Man, it baffles me because, like, he was asked one follow-up question. He was like, I like how Viktor Orban did this. Oh, really? This is how he did it. You like that? Oh, well, I don't necessarily. I didn't say I liked everything he ever done. Well, okay, well, she mentioned some other of the bad things that Viktor Orban did, but you mentioned this one specific thing on education. Then you were asked, okay, so you like how Viktor Orban took control of these educational institutions by having institutes controlled by his allies take them over. And he's like, well, you know, I didn't like everything. That's how he did it. I can't be like, hey guys, I like how Bob built this house. And he's like, you like how Bob built this house out of straws? Well, I didn't say I liked every detail of how Bob built his house. Like, the straw thing might have been a little over the top. Like, but that's how he did it. What am I It's the one, it's like, he's like, I like how he took over these institutions. Okay, here's how he did it. Never mind, I don't like how they took over these institutions, but I like how they took it. There's no depth to this. It's no depth to this. It's just a Viktor Orban aesthetic has taken them over, and they've just been smooth talk by a guy who sounds like Gru from Despicable Me. And I swear, go look it up if you don't believe me. Or if that's not the case, then he's lying. He knows what Viktor Orban did, and he just doesn't want to admit that he also has those type of authoritarian tendencies. And considering that JD Vance himself has said he would be willing to overthrow the Electoral College vote and send it back down to the states to help keep Trump in power, which Mike Pence didn't do, I don't think that's such a stretch. By the way, since we're in the area of talking about JD Vance's foreign policy views, and I love some Viktor Orban bashing because I'm so sick of the right wing's love affair with Viktor Orban, let's look at a few other things JD Vance has said on foreign affairs, specifically on Europe. Let's just check it out. I have this political article up. Vance has been sharply critical of Brussels over its decision to withhold funds from Hungary and Poland over democracy and rule of law concerns. You know, the EU has kept billions of dollars of promised aid away from Hungary because of its views on Ukraine. It captured billions of dollars of promised aid from a previous government in Poland because of the conservative Polish government's views, he said in an interview in February. That's not a rules-based order. That's Europe, from Brussels and Berlin, imposing liberal imperialistic views on the rest of the continent. Dog, I can't, come the fuck on. Trump cannot be going around blabbering about how Europe needs to pay its fair share. They need to pay their fair share. If they're going, they need to play by the rules when it comes to contributions. And if they don't, then we can literally abandon them. They can ignore their Article 5 protections. Russia can invade them. We don't give a fuck. But then Europe says, hey, Hungary, hey, Poland, you have to, if you're in the EU, you need to abide by EU laws to get our money. Mind you, to get our money, to get the EU's money, not to give Poland Poland's money, not to give Hungary Hungary's money, to give them the EU's aid money. And now all of a sudden, Vance is all in favor of economic aid when it comes to Viktor Orban's government, and they don't need to abide by EU laws and regulations and rules and regulations when part of the organization, because to have rules and regulations is imperialism. It's imperialism and so liberal when you have to apply by the rules and regulations of the European Union that you agreed to and signed treaties putting you part of, making you part of it. That's just too libtardy. It's just so libtard. My goodness. What else we got here? On Poland, Vance slammed Donald Tusk after the Polish Prime Minister criticized Republican for blocking U.S. aid to Ukraine in February this year. The new leader of Poland is arresting political opponents and owes his country's security to the generosity of mine. He might consider showing some appreciation, or at least toning down his authoritarian impulses. He called on Biden administration to respond to Tusk's government of state media reforms, purging loyalists installed by previous conservative governments. I urge you to encourage Poland's new government to reconsider any actions that could undermine it or freedom of Polish and American citizens, both hold dear. So to be clear, America should withhold aid from Poland because they're not doing the regulations and rules in its domestic affairs that he likes when talking about the political parties he likes. But when the EU says we're not going to give them their money, EU money, because they're not abiding by EU regulations, that's liberal imperialism. It's fine when we go to Poland and say we're not going to give you your money because you decided to do this with your state media institution. But when we do that to Hungary, when the EU does it, that's liberal imperialism. When we do it, it's cool and based. When the EU does it, it's liberal imperialism. When the EU makes the people, who are getting aid money actually do the things necessary to receive it, that's dumb. That's not based. That's not good fiscal management. That's cringe. That's unpaced. That's soy. When we do it, it's cool and based and not cringe and not liberal imperialism. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Not to mention, when we talk about purging loyalists in state media, in Poland, that is a real scandal that's going on. But in Hungary, all of the state media institutions and state control of the media is such a massive issue. But he then attacks the EU for the EU going after them on that. But then he'll stand up and attack Poland for their cleaning out of loyalists to the previous political. There's no consistent standard here. It's completely partisan. This is why I don't think he has any values, and I think he's grifting on a lot of these issues, if not on all of these issues, is because there's no consistency in the values he's applying when it comes to foreign policy. He is a Bobby swimming in the shallow end, treading just barely. On Germany, Berlin's military is a basket case, and its energy policy is idiotic, according to Vance. Germany's conduct in this war is disgraceful, and it's insulting to our voters that too many Republicans go along with it. All of their promises have materialized into manure. Why do American taxpayers subsidize idiotic German energy policy and weak defense policy? a mystery. What does it mean, subsidize German energy policy? I have no clue what that means. I understand what he means by subsidized military policy. We have military bases over there. But the Germans are buying our energy. Like a third of their energy imports now come from American LNG, liquefied natural gas. If anything, you could say that's a subsidization of the American economy. Selling them gas is not subsidizing. It's selling a good and or service. So I don't know what he means by subsidizing German energy policy. I can imagine what he means by defense policy. I have no clue what he means by energy policy. Anyway, that's enough of this. That's enough of JD Vance. That's enough JD Vance for today. Oh, did you guys see this moment from him speaking at the National Conservative?
By the way, I have to beat up on the UK. Just one additional thing. I was talking with a friend recently, and we were talking about, one of the big dangers in the world, of course, is nuclear proliferation, though, of course, the Biden administration doesn't care about it. And I was talking about, what is the first truly Islamist country that will get a nuclear weapon? And we were like, maybe it's Iran, maybe Pakistan already kind of counts. And then we sort of finally decided maybe it's actually the UK, since Labour just took over. But to my Tory friends, I have to say, you guys have got to get a handle on this, but neither here nor there.
Fun guy.